The morning mist clung to the frozen ground as Elena Petrov adjusted her rifle scope one final time. Her breath created small clouds in the bitter cold air of the Eastern Front. At just 22 years old, she had already become something the enemy feared more than artillery shells or tank attacks. They feared her precision, her patience, and most of all, her ability to disappear like a ghost after each successful shot. Elena hadn't planned to become a sniper. 3 months earlier, she had been a university student studying literature in Moscow. Her world changed forever when news arrived that her younger brother Mikhail had been killed defending Stalingrad. The letter from his commanding officer described how Mikhail had died trying to save wounded comrades from a burning tank. That night, Elena made a decision that would alter the course of her life and terrify an entire enemy division. She enlisted the next morning, walking into the recruitment office with determination burning in her dark eyes. The officers initially tried to convince her to join as a nurse or radio operator, roles they deemed more suitable for women. Elena refused every alternative they offered. She wanted to fight on the front lines, to make the enemy pay for every inch of her homeland they had taken. Her persistence finally wore them down, and she was sent to sniper training school. The training camp was brutal. Elena woke before dawn every day to practice shooting at targets hundreds of meters away. Her instructors, grizzled veterans with years of combat experience, pushed her harder than they pushed the male recruits. They wanted to break her spirit, to send her home to what they considered safety. Instead, their harsh treatment only made her more determined. She learned to control her breathing, to remain perfectly still for hours, and to calculate wind speed and bullet drop with mathematical precision. During target practice, Elena consistently outshot men who had been hunting since childhood. Her natural talent combined with fierce determination created something remarkable. She could hit a playing card at 300 meters, or place a bullet through a coin at 200. But marksmanship was only part of her training. She also learned camouflage, fieldcraft, and most importantly, how to survive alone behind enemy lines. After 6 weeks of intensive training, Elena graduated at the top of her class. Her commanding officer, a decorated colonel named Volkov, pulled her aside on graduation day. He warned her that being a female sniper would make her a special target for the enemy. They would hunt her with particular fury, he explained, because her very existence challenged their beliefs about women's roles in war. Elena listened politely to his concerns, then asked only one question. When could she leave for the front? Her first assignment took her to the outskirts of Stalingrad, where Soviet forces were locked in desperate street-by-street fighting with German troops. The city had been reduced to rubble, with buildings serving as sniper nests and every street corner potentially hiding death. Elena was paired with a spotter named Sergei, a veteran soldier who had lost his left eye to shrapnel, but retained perfect vision in his right. Sergei initially doubted Elena's abilities, making jokes about pretty girls playing war. His attitude changed completely after their first mission together. They had been positioned in the ruins of a school building, overlooking a square where German soldiers regularly moved supplies. Elena waited patiently for over 4 hours, barely moving despite the freezing temperature. When a German officer finally appeared, checking his map in what he thought was a safe location, Elena made her shot count. The bullet traveled over 400 meters, striking the officer precisely where Elena had aimed. Sergei watched through his binoculars as enemy soldiers frantically searched for the source of the shot. Finding nothing, Elena had already moved to a different position, invisible among the rubble. From that moment forward, Sergei became her most loyal supporter, helping her plan shots and watching for enemy counter-snipers. Word of Elena's skills spread quickly through both armies. Soviet soldiers began requesting her presence in their sectors, knowing that her rifle could eliminate specific threats that had been tormenting their units for weeks. German soldiers, meanwhile, started displaying increasing nervousness when operating in areas where she was known to be active. They began moving in larger groups and taking more precautions, slowing their advance and reducing their effectiveness. Elena's reputation grew with each confirmed kill. She developed a signature technique of leaving behind small tokens at her shooting positions. A red ribbon tied to debris, marking her presence after successful missions. These ribbons became symbols of hope for Soviet soldiers and sources of fear for their enemies. The psychological effect was as powerful as her actual shots, creating uncertainty and paranoia among German ranks. Her success attracted attention from higher command levels. Intelligence officers began providing her with specific target assignments, asking her to eliminate high-value enemy personnel. Elena accepted these missions eagerly, seeing each successful shot as revenge for her brother and countless other Soviet casualties. She studied photographs of target faces, memorized their daily routines, and planned elaborate approaches to get within shooting range. The winter fighting around Stalingrad became Elena's proving ground. She operated in conditions that would have broken lesser soldiers, crawling through snow and ice to reach optimal firing positions. Sometimes she waited for days in cramped hiding spots, surviving on cold rations and melted snow. Her patience was legendary among her fellow soldiers, who told stories about her ability to remain motionless for entire days while waiting for the perfect shot. By February, Elena had accumulated over 40 confirmed kills, an impressive number that placed her among the most successful snipers in the entire army. Each kill was carefully verified by spotters and commanders, ensuring accurate records. But numbers only told part of her story. The real measure of her impact was visible in enemy behavior changes, increased security measures, and growing reputation that spread far beyond the immediate battlefield. Elena knew that success would eventually bring consequences. Famous snipers became priority targets for enemy counter-snipers and special forces units. She had already survived several close calls, including one incident where an enemy sniper's bullet had passed so close to her head that it singed her hair. These experiences only made her more careful and more deadly, refining techniques that would soon make her the most hunted woman on the Eastern Front. March brought new challenges as German forces reorganized their approach to dealing with Elena's growing threat. Intelligence reports reached Soviet command indicating that enemy units had begun offering substantial rewards for information leading to her capture or elimination. The bounty started at 500 marks, a fortune for desperate civilians caught in the war zone, but it would soon grow much larger. Elena learned about the reward from her commanding officer during a briefing at temporary headquarters, established in a bombed-out factory. Colonel Volkov spread reconnaissance photos across a makeshift table, pointing to areas where German activity had increased dramatically. Enemy patrols had tripled in sectors where Elena operated, and counter-sniper teams were being deployed specifically to hunt her down. The colonel's weathered face showed genuine concern as he explained the situation. The reward money represented more than enemy frustration with her success. It signaled that Elena had become a strategic target whose elimination was considered essential for German morale and operational effectiveness. Her kills were no longer just reducing enemy numbers. They were disrupting command structures and creating psychological warfare effects that reached far beyond individual casualties. Elena received this news with characteristic calmness, asking only about her next assignment. The colonel assigned her to a new sector where German officers had been observed conducting regular meetings in a partially destroyed cathedral. Intelligence suggested that these gatherings involved high-ranking personnel planning major offensive operations. Elena's mission was to identify and eliminate key leadership figures during one of these meetings. Preparation for this mission required extensive reconnaissance work that Elena conducted personally. For 3 days, she observed the cathedral from various hidden positions, noting German security patterns and identifying potential shooting locations. The enemy had established checkpoints around the building's perimeter and posted guards on nearby rooftops, making approach extremely dangerous. Elena chose her position carefully, selecting a bombed apartment building 400 meters from the cathedral. The building's upper floors had been destroyed by artillery, but the lower levels remained structurally sound. She spent hours creating a carefully concealed shooting position among the rubble, ensuring multiple escape routes and clear sightlines to her target area. Her spotter Sergei helped establish the position during the night, carrying ammunition and supplies through sewers and basement tunnels to avoid German patrols. They worked in complete silence, communicating through hand signals while arranging camouflage materials and testing sight angles. By dawn, their position was virtually invisible from ground level or aerial observation. The target meeting was scheduled for the following afternoon, according to intercepted German communications. Elena spent the morning checking her rifle's zero and calculating range adjustments for different wind conditions. Her weapon was a modified Mosin Nagant rifle equipped with a telescopic sight, customized for her specific shooting preferences. She knew every component of this rifle intimately, having maintained and adjusted it through dozens of successful missions. When the appointed time arrived, Elena watched through her scope as German vehicles approached the cathedral. Several staff cars arrived in convoy, their occupants clearly high-ranking officers based on the ceremonial greetings and security protocols observed. Elena identified her primary target through uniform insignia, visible in her telescopic sight. A general whose photographs she had studied extensively during mission preparation. The general spent several minutes outside the cathedral, consulting with subordinates and reviewing documents. Elena controlled her breathing and waited for the optimal shot opportunity, knowing she would only get one chance before security forces reacted to her position. Wind conditions were favorable, and the target remained relatively stationary during his consultation with other officers. Elena's shot struck with perfect precision, eliminating the general instantly and creating immediate chaos among the assembled German personnel. Security forces reacted quickly, spreading out to search for the shooter's position while other officers sought cover behind vehicles and building walls. Elena and Sergei executed their planned withdrawal, moving through prepared escape routes while enemy soldiers concentrated their search in wrong directions. The successful elimination of the general created exactly the reaction Elena had expected. Within hours, German radio communications intercepted by Soviet intelligence revealed angry discussions about increasing her bounty to 1,000 marks. Enemy commanders were clearly frustrated by their inability to locate and eliminate a single sniper who continued disrupting their operations with impunity. News of the increased reward spread quickly through both military and civilian populations in the combat zone. Elena's fame grew accordingly, with Soviet soldiers treating her like a celebrity and German forces displaying increasing nervousness about her presence. The psychological impact was becoming as significant as her actual casualties, affecting enemy morale and operational confidence across entire divisions. Elena's success also attracted attention from partisan groups operating behind enemy lines. These civilian resistance fighters began providing her with intelligence about German movements and potential targets. They established communication networks that allowed Elena to receive updated information about enemy officer locations and meeting schedules, significantly improving her mission effectiveness. The collaboration with partisans created new opportunities but also increased risks. German forces responded to increased resistance activity by implementing harsher security measures and conducting brutal reprisal operations against suspected civilian collaborators. Elena realized that her growing reputation was endangering innocent people who supported her missions, adding moral complexity to her tactical decisions. Despite these concerns, Elena continued accepting high-value target assignments that her superiors considered essential for the broader war effort. Her next major mission involved eliminating a German artillery commander whose units had been devastating Soviet positions for weeks. This officer had established his headquarters in a heavily fortified mansion outside the city, surrounded by extensive security measures. Approaching this target required Elena to operate further behind enemy lines than ever before. Spending over a week infiltrating through German-controlled territory, she traveled primarily at night, hiding during daylight hours in carefully selected concealment positions. Local partisans provided occasional assistance, but Elena operated mostly alone to avoid compromising civilian contacts. The artillery commander proved to be an extremely cautious target who varied his routines and rarely exposed himself to potential sniper fire. Elena spent 4 days observing his headquarters, documenting security patterns and searching for shooting opportunities. Her patience was finally rewarded when the commander emerged to inspect new gun positions being constructed near his facility. The successful elimination of the artillery commander created immediate tactical benefits for Soviet forces, who reported dramatic reductions in enemy artillery fire within hours of Elena's shot. But the mission's success also triggered the most significant escalation in German efforts to capture her. Intelligence reports soon revealed that her bounty had been increased to 2,000 marks, and special counter-sniper units were being deployed specifically to hunt her down. The 2,000-mark reward transformed Elena from a battlefield threat into a strategic obsession for German command. Enemy intelligence services began dedicating significant resources to identifying her location and developing capture plans. They distributed wanted posters throughout occupied territories, offering the massive reward for information leading to her elimination. The posters featured a sketched portrait based on descriptions from survivors of her attacks. Though the image bore little resemblance to Elena's actual appearance, German counter-sniper teams arrived in Elena's operational area within days of the bounty increase. These specialists brought advanced equipment including high-powered scopes, specialized ammunition, and sophisticated detection devices designed to locate muzzle flashes from extreme distances. Their presence immediately changed the tactical environment, forcing Elena to modify techniques that had served her successfully for months. Elena adapted to these new threats by becoming even more unpredictable in her movements and shooting positions. She abandoned previously successful locations permanently, never returning to areas where she had made previous kills. Her shots became less frequent but more carefully planned, with extensive preparation dedicated to ensuring safe withdrawal routes after each mission. The increased German attention also brought unexpected consequences for Elena's personal safety beyond the battlefield. Enemy intelligence services began investigating her background, interviewing civilians who might have known her before the war. They discovered her real name, her university attendance, and details about her family members. This information was used to create detailed profiles aimed at predicting her behavior and potential hiding places. Soviet intelligence warned Elena that German agents were actively searching for her relatives who remained in territories under their control. Her parents had evacuated Moscow months earlier, but extended family members in smaller towns were potentially vulnerable to capture and interrogation. This knowledge added emotional stress to Elena's already dangerous situation, knowing that her military service was endangering innocent family members. Despite these pressures, Elena continued accepting high-priority missions from her commanders. Her next target was perhaps the most ambitious yet, a German division commander whose forces had been responsible for several war crimes against Soviet civilians. Intelligence reports indicated that this general would be visiting forward positions to inspect defensive preparations, providing a rare opportunity for elimination. The mission required Elena to infiltrate nearly 20 kilometers behind enemy lines, operating in territory where German security was extremely tight due to recent partisan activities. She traveled alone this time, avoiding partisan contacts to minimize risks to civilian collaborators. The journey took 5 nights of careful movement through forests and along abandoned railway lines. Elena established her shooting position in the ruins of a small church, overlooking the German defensive positions. The location provided excellent concealment and multiple escape routes, but required her to remain hidden for over 36 hours while waiting for the target's arrival. She survived on cold rations and collected rainwater, maintaining perfect stillness despite cramped conditions and constant tension. When the German general finally arrived for his inspection tour, he was accompanied by the largest security detail Elena had ever observed. Multiple armored vehicles surrounded his staff car, and counter-sniper teams were positioned on every prominent building in the area. The general himself wore body armor and moved quickly between protected positions, making accurate shooting extremely difficult. Elena waited patiently for over 4 hours, watching the general's movements through her telescopic sight while calculating potential shot opportunities. Her chance finally came when the general paused to examine defensive positions through his own binoculars, momentarily exposing his head above protective barriers. The shot required precise calculation due to wind conditions and the extreme range of nearly 500 meters. The bullet found its mark perfectly, eliminating the general instantly despite his body armor protection. The immediate response was overwhelming, with German forces converging on Elena's estimated position from multiple directions. She executed her withdrawal plan flawlessly, moving through predetermined routes while enemy soldiers searched frantically through the church ruins where she had been concealed. Elena's successful elimination of the division commander created panic within German leadership circles. Radio communications intercepted by Soviet intelligence revealed heated discussions about her continued effectiveness, despite increasingly sophisticated countermeasures. The reward for her capture was immediately raised to 3,000 marks, an unprecedented sum that demonstrated the enemy's desperation to stop her activities. The massive bounty attracted attention from unexpected sources, including criminal elements and desperate civilians willing to risk collaboration with enemy forces for financial gain. Elena found herself needing to be suspicious of everyone she encountered, including Soviet civilians who might be tempted by the enormous reward money. Trust became a luxury she could no longer afford in any situation. German propaganda efforts intensified alongside the increased bounty, with radio broadcasts and printed materials portraying Elena as a dangerous criminal rather than a legitimate soldier. These propaganda campaigns aimed to turn civilian populations against her by emphasizing the reward money and encouraging denunciations. Enemy loudspeakers in occupied areas broadcast daily announcements about the bounty, describing Elena as a terrorist who threatened innocent civilians. The psychological warfare campaign had mixed effects on different population groups. Some civilians were indeed tempted by the reward money and began reporting suspicious activities to German authorities. However, many others were inspired by Elena's success against occupying forces and provided increased support for her operations. The bounty inadvertently transformed Elena into a folk hero whose exploits were discussed in whispered conversations throughout occupied territories. Elena's growing fame also created operational challenges for Soviet commanders who needed to balance her tactical value against the risks associated with her celebrity status. Her presence in any sector immediately attracted intense German attention, potentially endangering other military operations. Commanders began requesting her services for only the most critical missions where her unique skills were absolutely essential. The 3,000 mark reward represented more than money to German leadership. It symbolized their admission that conventional military methods had failed to neutralize a single enemy sniper. This acknowledgement of failure was damaging to German morale and propaganda efforts, particularly among troops who had been told that Soviet forces were inferior and easily defeated. Elena understood that her increased fame had made her situation increasingly precarious. Every successful mission now brought greater risks, not only for herself but for anyone associated with her activities. She began operating with even greater caution, sometimes spending weeks planning single shots and avoiding any pattern that enemy forces might predict or exploit. The escalating bounty also attracted attention from the highest levels of both military hierarchies. Soviet leadership began discussing how to best utilize Elena's unique capabilities while protecting her from the intensified enemy response. German commanders, meanwhile, were under increasing pressure from their superiors to resolve the Elena situation quickly and decisively, regardless of the resources required. The spring offensive brought German forces closer to Elena's operational base than they had ever been before. Enemy advances threatened to cut off Soviet supply lines and isolate frontline positions where Elena had been operating for months. Military intelligence reported that German commanders had specifically planned their advance routes to limit Elena's mobility and force her into predetermined killing zones where their counter-sniper teams waited. Elena received urgent orders to withdraw to safer positions behind the new Soviet defensive lines, but she refused to abandon her area of operations. She argued that retreating would hand the Germans a victory they had been unable to achieve through direct military action. Her stubborn determination concerned her commanders, who recognized that her emotional investment in the fight was beginning to override tactical prudence. Instead of withdrawing, Elena proposed an audacious plan to disrupt German offensive operations by eliminating key commanders during the critical phase of their advance. She identified 3 high-value targets whose deaths would create maximum confusion and delay enemy plans. 2 divisional commanders and 1 corps-level general, who was coordinating the entire offensive operation. Her plan required operating deeper behind enemy lines than ever before, with minimal support and maximum exposure to capture. Soviet command initially rejected Elena's proposal as too dangerous, but changed their position when intelligence reports confirmed that German forces were indeed concentrating their best units for a decisive breakthrough attempt. The successful elimination of enemy leadership during this critical period could disrupt timing that had taken months to coordinate. Elena's mission was approved with the understanding that she would be operating beyond any possibility of rescue or support. Elena spent 3 days preparing for what she knew might be her final mission. She studied detailed maps of German positions, memorized photographs of her targets, and calculated ammunition requirements for extended operations behind enemy lines. Her equipment was reduced to absolute essentials: rifle, ammunition, basic survival supplies, and emergency medical kit. Everything else was discarded to maximize mobility and minimize detection risks. The infiltration began during a heavy rainstorm that provided cover for Elena's movement across the front lines. She traveled alone through German positions, avoiding patrols and checkpoints by following routes that she had memorized during weeks of reconnaissance preparation. The journey took most of the night, with Elena reaching her first target area just before dawn. Her first target was a divisional commander, whose headquarters was located in a commandeered farmhouse 5 kilometers behind the front lines. The location was heavily guarded, but Elena identified a shooting position in a grain silo that provided excellent concealment and clear sight lines to the target area. She spent the entire day hidden in the silo, observing enemy movements and waiting for the commander to expose himself to accurate fire. The divisional commander appeared late in the afternoon, emerging from the farmhouse to conduct a briefing with subordinate officers in the courtyard. Elena had been waiting for over 8 hours in cramped conditions, but her patience was rewarded when the target positioned himself exactly where she had anticipated. Her shot was perfect, eliminating the commander instantly and creating immediate chaos among the assembled German personnel. Elena's withdrawal from the first shooting position was complicated by the intense enemy response to their commander's death. German forces immediately established roadblocks and began systematic searches of all buildings in the area. Elena avoided detection by hiding in a drainage culvert for several hours, while enemy soldiers searched overhead, eventually emerging after dark to continue toward her second target location. The second divisional commander was located at a forward observation post established in a church bell tower overlooking the front lines. This target was more challenging because the observation post was constantly manned and heavily protected by security forces. Elena spent 2 days observing the position, identifying patterns in guard rotations and noting times when the commander appeared most vulnerable to sniper fire. Her opportunity came when the commander climbed the bell tower to observe Soviet positions through artillery spotting equipment. Elena had positioned herself in the ruins of a school building 300 meters from the church, waiting through an entire night for this specific moment. The shot required extreme precision due to the target's partial concealment behind the tower's stone walls, but Elena's bullet found its mark perfectly. The successful elimination of the second commander triggered an even more intense German response than the first killing had produced. Enemy forces began conducting house-to-house searches throughout the entire area, interrogating civilians and threatening harsh punishment for anyone providing assistance to Elena. She was forced to remain hidden for over 24 hours while search operations continued around her concealment position. Elena's final target presented the greatest challenge of her military career. The corps commander was located at a heavily fortified command bunker, constructed in a hillside cave system. The position was surrounded by multiple defensive rings, including machine gun nests, artillery positions, and roving patrols that made approach extremely difficult. Traditional sniper tactics would be ineffective against such comprehensive protection measures. Instead of attempting a long-range shot, Elena decided to infiltrate close to the bunker entrance and wait for an opportunity when the general might emerge for inspection duties or meetings with subordinates. This approach required her to remain hidden within the German defensive perimeter for an indefinite period, surviving on minimal supplies while avoiding detection by security forces, who were actively searching for her. Elena established her final position in a natural cave overlooking the bunker complex, camouflaging herself so effectively that she became virtually invisible even at close range. She remained in this position for 3 full days, observing enemy activities and waiting for her target to present himself for elimination. Food and water were severely limited, and Elena knew that prolonged exposure was weakening her physical condition significantly. On the 4th morning, her patience was finally rewarded. The corps commander emerged from his bunker to participate in a conference with visiting officers from higher command levels. The meeting took place on a concrete platform outside the bunker entrance, providing Elena with her first clear shot opportunity in days. The range was only 150 meters, making accuracy virtually certain despite her weakened condition. Elena's final shot eliminated the corps commander in front of multiple witnesses, including several high-ranking German officers who had come to discuss the stalled offensive operations. The psychological impact was devastating to German morale, demonstrating that even their most protected leaders were vulnerable to Elena's deadly skills. The killing created immediate confusion about command, authority, and delayed critical operational decisions. The elimination of 3 senior commanders within 4 days created chaos throughout German offensive plans that had been months in preparation. Communications intercepts revealed frantic discussions about postponing operations, reorganizing command structures, and implementing new security procedures. Elena's mission had succeeded beyond expectations, disrupting enemy plans and buying valuable time for Soviet defensive preparations. However, Elena's situation had become desperate during the extended infiltration operation. She was trapped deep behind enemy lines, exhausted from days of minimal food and water and surrounded by German forces who were conducting intensive searches for her location. Her ammunition was nearly depleted and she had no communication with Soviet forces who might coordinate a rescue operation. Elena's desperate situation deep behind enemy lines forced her to abandon traditional sniper tactics and focus entirely on survival and evasion. The elimination of 3 German commanders had triggered the largest manhunt in the sector's history, with thousands of enemy soldiers dedicated exclusively to finding and capturing her. Radio intercepts indicated that German command had authorized unlimited resources for her capture, including specialized tracking dogs and expert hunters familiar with local terrain. The search operation was unlike anything Elena had previously faced. German forces established concentric circles of checkpoints around the area where she was believed to be hiding, gradually tightening their perimeter while conducting systematic searches of every building, cave, and potential hiding place. Civilian populations were evacuated from entire villages to deny Elena potential assistance or concealment opportunities. Elena remained hidden in her cave position for 2 more days, listening to enemy search parties passing nearby while she struggled with increasing weakness from lack of food and water. Her physical condition was deteriorating rapidly, but moving from her concealment would expose her to almost certain capture. She knew that German forces were particularly motivated to take her alive because of the intelligence, value she represented, and the propaganda opportunity her capture would provide. On the 7th day of her hiding, Elena observed German soldiers systematically searching the cave system where she had taken refuge. They were moving methodically from cave to cave, using flashlights and trained dogs to investigate every possible hiding place. Elena realized that discovery was inevitable within hours, forcing her to make a desperate decision about whether to surrender or attempt a final escape. Elena chose to fight. She prepared her remaining ammunition and positioned herself to inflict maximum casualties on the search party when they finally located her cave. Her decision was influenced partly by military duty and partly by personal knowledge of what capture would mean. Intelligence briefings had informed her about German treatment of captured snipers, particularly female soldiers who had killed large numbers of enemy personnel. The confrontation began when German tracking dogs detected Elena's scent at the cave entrance. Enemy soldiers approached cautiously, knowing they were facing one of the most dangerous snipers on the entire Eastern Front. Elena waited until the search party entered her cave before opening fire with her rifle, eliminating 2 soldiers immediately and forcing the others to retreat while calling for reinforcements. The firefight that followed lasted for over 3 hours, with Elena using her intimate knowledge of the cave system to move between positions while German forces attempted to surround her location. She had only 12 rounds of ammunition remaining, forcing her to make every shot count while enemy soldiers fired blindly into the caves with automatic weapons and threw grenades into passages they could not safely enter. Elena's tactical situation was hopeless, but her resistance continued to inflict casualties on German forces who had expected to capture an exhausted and defenseless fugitive. Instead, they encountered a determined soldier who used every advantage the terrain provided while making her final stand. Radio communications indicated that German commanders were frustrated by their inability to capture her alive, despite overwhelming numerical superiority. As Elena's ammunition dwindled to her final few rounds, she heard sounds indicating that German forces were preparing to use flamethrowers and explosive charges to force her from the cave system. These tactics would make her position untenable within minutes. But they also represented German acknowledgement that conventional assault methods had failed against her defensive preparations. Elena made her final decision as enemy soldiers prepared their assault equipment. Rather than face capture or death by fire, she chose to attempt one last impossible escape through a narrow cave passage that led toward the hillside behind her position. The passage was barely wide enough for a human body and might not connect to the surface, but it offered her only remaining chance for survival. The escape attempt required Elena to crawl through complete darkness for over an hour, following an underground passage that gradually narrowed until she could barely move forward. Her weakened condition made progress extremely difficult, and several times she nearly became stuck in narrow sections that would have trapped her permanently underground. The passage filled with smoke from explosions as German forces began their final assault on her abandoned position. Elena finally emerged from the underground passage through a small opening, concealed by vegetation on the opposite side of the hill from German search operations. Her escape had taken her beyond the immediate search perimeter, but she remained deep behind enemy lines with no supplies, no ammunition, and severely weakened physical condition. German forces would soon discover her escape route and expand their search accordingly. For the next 5 days, Elena moved primarily at night towards Soviet lines, avoiding German patrols while searching for food and water in abandoned buildings and farms. Her progress was painfully slow due to her weakened condition and the need to remain concealed during daylight hours. Several times she narrowly avoided capture by German search parties who were following her trail. Elena's salvation came through unexpected assistance from a group of partisans who discovered her hiding in a destroyed barn. These civilian fighters had been monitoring German search operations and recognized Elena from descriptions circulated by Soviet intelligence networks. They provided her with food, medical attention, and safe transportation toward friendly territory through routes known only to local resistance members. The partisan rescue operation required careful coordination to avoid German checkpoints and patrol areas. Elena was hidden in a supply cart beneath agricultural products, while partisan guides navigated back roads and forest paths toward Soviet positions. The journey took 2 days, during which Elena gradually recovered some physical strength while remaining concealed from enemy observation. Elena finally reached Soviet lines during a moonless night, crossing through a gap in German positions that partisans had identified and used for previous rescue operations. She was immediately evacuated to a field hospital for medical evaluation and debriefing by intelligence officers who wanted detailed information about her extended operation behind enemy lines. The medical examination revealed that Elena had lost significant weight during her ordeal and was suffering from dehydration, exhaustion, and minor injuries sustained during her cave escape. However, her overall condition was better than expected given the circumstances she had endured. Military doctors prescribed rest and nutritional rehabilitation before she could return to active duty. During her recovery period, Elena learned about the broader impact of her successful mission against the 3 German commanders. Soviet intelligence reported that enemy offensive operations had been delayed for over 2 weeks, while German forces reorganized their command structure and implemented new security procedures. The delay had provided crucial time for Soviet defensive preparations that ultimately contributed to repelling the German advance. Elena's escape and recovery also triggered significant changes in German counterintelligence operations. Enemy forces had invested enormous resources in her capture, only to have her slip through their most intensive manhunt. The failure was embarrassing for German commanders and demonstrated that even their best efforts could not neutralize a skilled and determined sniper operating behind their lines. Elena's return to Soviet lines marked the beginning of her transformation from feared sniper to legendary figure whose story would inspire resistance movements across occupied Europe. Military intelligence officers debriefed her extensively about German countermeasures, security procedures, and leadership personalities she had observed during her extended operation behind enemy lines. This information proved invaluable for planning future operations and training other snipers. The successful elimination of 3 German generals within 4 days had created ripple effects throughout enemy command structures that extended far beyond Elena's operational sector. German forces were implementing new security protocols for senior officers, that significantly restricted their mobility and effectiveness. Commanders who had previously moved freely between positions now required extensive security details that reduced their ability to conduct personal reconnaissance and maintain direct contact with frontline units. Soviet propaganda services seized upon Elena's story as a powerful tool for boosting civilian and military morale. Her exploits were featured in newspapers, radio broadcasts, and printed materials distributed throughout the Soviet Union and occupied territories. The narrative of a young woman who had single-handedly disrupted major enemy operations resonated powerfully with populations struggling under wartime hardships. Elena initially resisted her transformation into a propaganda symbol, preferring to focus on her military duties rather than public appearances and media interviews. However, her commanders convinced her that her story's inspirational value was as important to the war effort as her shooting skills. She reluctantly agreed to participate in selected publicity activities while continuing her sniper operations whenever possible. The German response to Elena's continued survival was swift and decisive. Her bounty was increased to an unprecedented 5,000 marks, making her the most wanted individual on the entire Eastern Front. Enemy intelligence services distributed new photographs and detailed physical descriptions throughout their network, offering additional rewards for information about her location or activities. German propaganda efforts also intensified, attempting to counter Soviet narratives about Elena's heroism by portraying her as a criminal terrorist who threatened innocent civilians. Enemy radio broadcasts described alleged atrocities and claimed that Elena targeted medical personnel and civilian administrators rather than legitimate military targets. These propaganda campaigns had limited effectiveness among Soviet populations but may have influenced some occupied territories where German control was stronger. Elena's fame attracted attention from international sources, including journalists from allied countries who wanted to interview the remarkable sniper whose exploits were becoming known throughout Europe. These interviews helped spread her story to broader audiences and provided additional propaganda value for the Soviet war effort. Elena discovered that her reputation had reached places she had never imagined, inspiring resistance fighters in countries far from the Eastern Front. The increased attention also brought new responsibilities and restrictions that limited Elena's operational flexibility. Security concerns meant that her movements were monitored constantly, and her missions required approval from higher command levels than previously necessary. Elena found these restrictions frustrating, feeling that bureaucratic procedures were reducing her effectiveness against enemy forces. Despite these limitations, Elena continued conducting sniper operations with remarkable success throughout the remainder of the spring campaign. Her techniques had evolved considerably during her time behind enemy lines, incorporating lessons learned about German countermeasures and security procedures. She became even more patient and methodical in her approach, sometimes spending weeks planning single shots that would have maximum psychological and tactical impact. Elena's targets became increasingly selective as her commanders recognized that her reputation was as valuable as her actual kills. Each successful mission reinforced German fears about her capabilities while demonstrating Soviet determination to continue offensive operations despite enemy countermeasures. Her presence in any sector immediately affected German behavior, forcing them to implement security measures that reduced their operational effectiveness. The psychological warfare aspects of Elena's operations became increasingly sophisticated as Soviet intelligence services developed new ways to exploit her reputation. False intelligence about her location was deliberately leaked to German sources, causing enemy forces to waste resources, searching empty areas while actual operations proceeded elsewhere. Her famous red ribbons were planted at locations where she had never operated, creating confusion about her real activities. German frustration with their inability to eliminate Elena led to increasingly desperate measures that sometimes backfired spectacularly. Enemy forces began conducting harsh reprisal operations against civilian populations in areas where Elena was believed to operate, hoping to turn local sentiment against her. Instead, these brutal tactics often increased partisan support for Elena and provided her with additional intelligence sources about German movements. The 5,000 mark bounty on Elena created unexpected complications for German security services, who found themselves investigating hundreds of false leads from civilians hoping to claim the reward money. Every suspicious person or unusual activity in occupied territories generated reports that required investigation, straining German intelligence resources and reducing their ability to conduct effective counter-operations. Elena's story had also begun inspiring women in occupied countries to join resistance movements or take direct action against German forces. Intelligence reports from across Europe described incidents where female partisans had specifically cited Elena's example as motivation for their own activities. This broader influence multiplied the strategic impact of her individual actions far beyond what her actual kills had achieved. As summer approached, Elena received her most challenging assignment yet, eliminating a German corps commander who was personally overseeing the construction of massive defensive fortifications designed to stop anticipated Soviet offensives. This target was protected by the most comprehensive security measures Elena had ever encountered, requiring her to develop entirely new tactical approaches. The mission planning process took over a month, involving detailed reconnaissance by multiple intelligence sources and careful analysis of the target's daily routines and security protocols. Elena studied architectural plans of the fortification complex, memorized photographs of key personnel, and practiced shooting scenarios using mock-up targets at similar ranges and angles. Elena's approach to this final target demonstrated how her skills had evolved throughout her military career. Instead of attempting a traditional long-range shot, she infiltrated the construction site disguised as a civilian worker, using forged documents provided by partisan contacts. This approach required her to suppress her sniper instincts and operate as an intelligence agent, rather than a marksman. For 3 days, Elena worked alongside genuine civilian laborers, while observing the German commander's patterns and identifying optimal shooting opportunities. The disguise was extremely dangerous because discovery would mean immediate execution, but it provided her with access to protected areas that would have been impossible to reach through traditional sniper tactics. Elena's final shot was made from inside the fortification complex at a range of less than 100 meters, eliminating the German commander while he conducted an inspection tour of construction progress. The close range and unexpected shooting position made the shot virtually certain, but Elena's escape required her to disappear into the chaos of panicked workers and security forces searching for the assassin. The successful completion of this mission marked the peak of Elena's military career and demonstrated her evolution from skilled marksman to sophisticated special operations soldier. Her elimination of the fortification commander delayed construction schedules and forced German forces to reorganize their defensive preparations, providing strategic benefits that extended far beyond the individual casualty. Elena's final confirmed kill brought her total to over 100 enemy soldiers, making her one of the most successful snipers in military history. However, her impact on the war extended far beyond these statistics to include psychological warfare effects, intelligence gathering contributions, and inspirational value that influenced resistance movements across occupied Europe. The war's end found Elena recognized as a hero of the Soviet Union, decorated with the highest honors her country could bestow. She had survived the most intensive manhunts in military history, eliminated strategic targets that changed the course of major operations, and inspired countless others to resist tyranny regardless of overwhelming odds. Her story became legend, proving that individual courage and skill could challenge even the most powerful military forces when applied with intelligence and determination.